Welcome back to our discussion on planning successfully for retirement. We talked about time before, and I said we're going to talk about time, not timing, because we don't believe timing can be done successfully, and no one has ever proven that they can successfully time markets. We think it's much more important to be invested in the market, in a portfolio that allows you to accomplish your goals, but also be comfortable through all market cycles. So this slide that's up now, this is one of my favorites because I think it really illustrates the point. But this slide represents the risk of missing the best days in the market. And this goes back to 1997. So we have the last 20 years, and this is the S&P 500, the stock market, and the trading days. By the way, there were 5,217 trading days in this 20-year period that we're looking at right here. If you had been invested just in the S&P 500 for all 5,217 of those days, you would have seen a return of 7.2%. If you had missed just the 10 best days during that period, your return went down to 3.5%. How about if you missed the 20 best days? Now your return went to 1.2. If you missed the 30 best, now your return is negative. And then you can see if you missed the 40 best, the 50 best. The idea of this is that only by being invested through all periods can you reap the rewards of the best days in the market. Just like the market has very volatile down days, it works the same way on the upside. Markets move violently both up and down, and you can't only be in the markets when they're going up and out of them when they're going down. In theory, that sounds terrific, but in practice, we can't know when those down days are going to happen, so we need to be invested throughout the entire period. And we need to be invested in a portfolio that allows us to sleep at night, so we'll talk about putting that type of portfolio together shortly. What I'd like to do now is take a look a little more closely at this concept of time and using time to our advantage. The slide that's up now is an illustration of the S&P 500, and it goes back to 1937, so we have a long history of the S&P 500, and this is just, and take a look at it for a moment, it's all of the up years and down years of the S&P 500 going back to 1937. If you look at that, what you might notice, if you didn't know anything else, is that there appear to be a lot more up years than there are down years, although there are several down years in this period. If we take a look at a slightly different chart, now this is still the S&P 500, but now all we've done is we've taken all of those one-year periods and we've placed 2 years on either end of them. So we've got 5-year rolling averages for the S&P 500. Now, what do you notice when you're looking at this historical timeline? Lots of the down periods go away. Yes, there is still a pretty substantial down period during some world wars. There's also a down period in the 70s where we had an oil embargo, and then there's some other down periods during the 2000s, the early 2000s when we had the terrorist attack, and then in 2008 when we had the near collapse of the financial system. But other than those periods, if we look at 5-year periods, all of the other downturns go away. What if we put 10-year periods together? Now, all of the bad stuff goes away with the exception of a couple of periods with a world war and the '08, the Great Recession, as it's called. So if we have the right time horizon, we can rid ourselves of a lot of the volatility issues that tend to keep us up at night. If we then get even a little more sophisticated and use another textbook principle of financial management called diversification, we further reduce risk and potentially reduce loss and volatility by adding this concept called diversification. If we take a look, and I know the chart that's up now is a little bit busy, but I think it's worth the time to understand what's here. If all that we've done here is we've gone back again to 1928 and we're looking at the long-term averages for large company stocks as measured by the S&P 500, and then small company stocks, long-term bonds, and then we start to put together a diversified portfolio. So if you take a look at the average return of large cap stocks during that period, it was about 9.5%. Small company stocks, about 11.8, almost 12. Bonds were at 5.1. If you then look at the 50-50 portfolio, and all we've done here is we've taken 50% from the S&P and 50% from long-term bonds, we can see that we averaged 7.2%. If we get a slightly more diversified portfolio and we have 40% in the S&P, 40% in bonds, and 20% in small company stocks, our return goes to 8.1. Now let's look for a moment at standard deviation, and that's just a way to measure risk. If you look at the highest return and the lowest return for each of those categories, you'll see for large company stocks, the best year they ever had, it was up 52.6%. The worst year, it was down 43. The spread, just the numerical difference between high and low, was 96.4. Now let's take a look back at our 50-50 portfolio. We're earning 7.2 with a spread of 53. So look at that for a moment. We've got 70 to 80% of the upside of stocks with 40% less risk. That's the concept of diversification. And if we take a look at removing the Great Depression and World War II, you're going to see the same concept applies. Look at large cap stocks, what they've done over that period from 1946 to 2018. They've returned just shy of 12%. Small company stocks almost 13. Bonds at 6. Let's look at the high return and low return for stocks. You see the spread for large cap is at 89. The spread for small cap stocks, 120%. Now let's look at our return. Look at our 40% S&P, 40% bond, 20% small company portfolio. We got a return of about 9.5% with a spread of 48. So we get 80% or so of the return of stocks with about half the risk. That's what you need to do in your own portfolio. You get to start to engineer a portfolio that gives you the return that you're looking for with a risk level that allows you to sleep at night. Volatility can be reduced further with asset allocation, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time boring you with stories about asset allocation. What I will tell you is there are folks who won Nobel Prizes for their work in asset allocation. And asset allocation really is just the scientific application of putting different pieces of your portfolio together. How much you have in large company stocks versus small company, how much you have in international versus domestic. And there is a science to putting that together to give you the returns that you seek while also reducing risk. We're going to continue to discuss your retirement by talking about some other things that can get in the way, including debt and how to manage debt, college education funding, and retirement planning. And we'll talk about concepts like Social Security, company retirement plans, your own individual retirement accounts, and your own personal portfolio. And then we'll also discuss the risks that we all face in life, death, disability, long-term care, and other planning options that are available. So let's talk about some of the other things that we have to contend with in addition to our own retirement. One of the things that we hear often is about the cost of colleges and universities. And if you want to pre-fund a child or a grandchild's education, the best advice that you can get is to start soon. The earlier you start, the better off you'll be. No different than saving for your own retirement. The sooner you get started, the better off you'll be down the road. But let's consider funding an education. If you take a look at the slide that's up, if you start to fund an education when a child is born, and you're paid like most of us, you get paid twice a month, you have 432 paychecks until that child goes to school. Now, if you procrastinate and you put off starting to fund that education until the child is in middle school, you have 168 paychecks left until they go to school. If you procrastinate further and you wait until the child is in high school, you have 96 paychecks left until they reach college age. So if you start right now, ask yourself, how many paychecks do you have left? There are several types of plans. You can see on the screen that there are all sorts of education plans that are available for you to use. Oftentimes people will ask us which is best. Well, it depends on lots of things, but it starts with your situation and what it is you're trying to accomplish. Certainly the 529 plan has received probably more press than any of the others, and for good reason. It is an excellent plan when you're talking about dealing with saving for an education. But there are other options available as well. UTMA, which is a uniform transfer to minors account, which may give a little more flexibility. There are also these things called Coverdell accounts. You can set up your own trust account. And then, of course, there are also these 529 prepaid tuition programs. So you can take a look and see at some of the different options available with each of these plans. Regardless of which plan you select, the most important concept is to start as soon as possible. We run schedules for folks regularly to let them know whether or not they're on track to accomplish whatever the goal is. If the goal is retirement, we'll run a retirement projection that tells them whether or not they're on track. If it's funding for an education, we can run a schedule to show whether or not you're on track to fund for all 4 years, 2 years, 8 years, whatever the goal is. You should be able to track and see what your progress is toward those goals. We're going to talk now a little bit more about Social Security. We've talked about Social Security before, and I said that you probably don't want to count on Social Security as the main source of income in retirement. It certainly might be a source but it should not be the primary source of your retirement. And if you think about Social Security, it is a program that's in transition. We hear talk about it regularly. You hear talk about when the funding will run out. There's a reason for that, and the reason goes back to, if we go back to shortly after Social Security came into existence, and that was in the 30s. But in 1950, there were 16 workers for every one retired person. Now, if you fast forward to 2010, in 2010, there were about 3 workers for every one retired person. In 2035, it's projected that there will be just over 2 workers for every one retired person. So you can see that there's a transition in place. And the 2 big reasons for that include our longer life expectancies, thanks to advances in medicine and other places. We're living longer, healthier lives. And there are also lower birth rates. So those things add up to a program that is being discussed by Congress regularly, and it's in transition. And I don't know that anyone can tell you exactly what's going to happen. We would just tell you that you should not count on Social Security as the mainstay of your retirement income. What we think you should be counting on, more so, is your own retirement plan or your company-sponsored retirement plan. Take a look at what's on the screen. We'll tell you that there are 2 types of retirement plans: a defined contribution and a defined benefit. Defined contribution plans are the most popular plans that are out there today. The tax benefits include you get a deduction for every dollar that you contribute to the plan, and then the earnings are deferred while they stay in the plan. You have the opportunity to use an asset allocation model that is appropriate for you, and as an individual participant with self-direction, you can make that model anything that you want. Or if you're the trustee of your own company's plan, then you have the opportunity to make that model the appropriate model. You also get to control the taxation. And what do we mean by that? Well, while the money is inside of the plan, it grows tax deferred. When you retire and begin to take the money out, now you pay taxes. But you get to control how much of that you're going to take out and the rate at which you withdraw those funds. Defined benefit plan is a little bit different, and as you can see here, defined benefit plan used to be more popular. They've become almost too expensive to continue to maintain. But these were companies that had a monthly benefit amount that was determined by your earnings prior to retirement. And on the plus side, this was an income stream that was paid to you throughout your lifetime, or if you chose a joint payment for you and your spouse, then there was a reduced amount paid to you for your joint lives. The checks came steady every month for life. On the downside, the benefit level usually didn't have any kind of an inflation rider on it, so it didn't increase with inflation. Also, the benefit was taxable. There was no opportunity for you to defer or shelter it. The rate of return was usually a lower single-digit rate of return. And then when the worker and a joint beneficiary, if there was one on there, when they passed away, there was nothing remaining for the estate. This type of plan benefited older workers over younger workers, and as I said, it was a high cost to companies to maintain, so many fewer plans exist as a result today. There's also this concept of an individual retirement account. If you have earned income, you have the opportunity to put money into your own IRA. There are a few types of IRAs. We'll show you on the screen here the main three types. First, let me tell you what an IRA is. It's simply a tax-deferred retirement account for an individual. It allows us to put money aside and tax defer it. And there's the three types include an IRA rollover, and this is what you would do if you changed employers or retired and you wanted to continue to tax defer your company retirement plan. You use an IRA rollover, and that way no taxes occur and the money continues to grow tax deferred. Then there's also a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. We've all heard of these. The traditional IRA allows earnings to grow tax deferred until you take them out. Your contribution may or may not be tax deductible. It's going to depend. There's an income test. If you're earning over a certain amount, you don't get to deduct it, but it still grows tax deferred. With a Roth IRA, you don't ever get a deduction for contributing to a Roth IRA, but the earnings accumulate on a tax-deferred basis, and when you take the funds out, you can receive the funds back tax-free. So there are penalties if you take the money out of these IRAs prior to age 59 and a half. There's potentially a 10% penalty for doing that. One of the reasons you get some of the tax advantages is because the folks who put these limits in place wanted to give you an incentive to save for retirement. So taking the money out before retirement, 59 and a half, could lead to a 10% penalty. We're out of time for today, but please join us next time when we will continue our discussion about being ready and prepared for a successful retirement. You can reach out to us at any time. The locations include Bethel Park, Wexford, downtown, and Beaver. Thank you for joining us for this session on being financially prepared for retirement.